Got a bit of a different one for you guys today. So instead of doing the usual let's go out and take a landscape photo and then post it on YouTube, took a bit of a different tack here. So what you can see in the background is an image that I actually managed to get it commended in the Scottish Landscape Photographer of the Year competition. What it is it's a series of just over 100 different photos that I took down at St. Abbs in Scotland as a solar storm hit. So what you can see in the background is an actual aurora that's kicked off. And when you combine those different images as well, you get the effect of the star trails in the background. So what I decided to do was, when looking through the sequence of images, I kind of thought, hey, it would be a pretty good idea to go about and create a time-lapse sequence of it, because you get the effect of the lighthouse with the light moving around across the sea, plus the actual aurora dancing in the background. You guys probably starting to pick up that I'm a bit of an aurora junkie, so if you're into that kind of thing, well, what I'll do is also talk through the specific settings that I use to capture the aurora, and I'll go through a little bit of a rough cut edit in Adobe Lightroom, and then I'll also go through a rough cut edit of the actual time-lapse sequence itself in Adobe Premiere Pro. What do you actually need to shoot a time-lapse? So first you actually obviously need a camera. So I've got a DSLR, I shoot with a Canon 5DS. It really actually doesn't matter specifically what camera you actually use itself, as long as you can control the exposure through using manual settings. The next absolutely crucial thing is to have a sturdy tripod. So the thing I'm going to say is I've probably actually learned the hard way through buying cheap tripods. It's essentially a false economy. So I've currently got a Manfrotto CX Pro carbon fiber tripod. Trust me, just spend the money, it's totally worth doing so. For taking photos for a time-lapse sequence, there are a couple essential things that you actually need to focus on. So I've already mentioned using a quality tripod. So the reality that you've got is that what you want to do is get your camera actually just set up, and that's where it's going to stay, because you need to take the exact same photo over and over and over again. And to actually do that, what you need to do is make sure that you actually compose your photo properly in the beginning. So spend the time to nail it. If you get it wrong, you're faced with a world of pain during the editing phase. So you can see, for instance, with nighttime photography over here, what I do is I really take the time, and I'll probably even spend maybe up to about 5 minutes actually getting the composition and set up totally right, and making sure that the horizon's level, etc, etc. So in the middle of the night, you've got a bit of a challenge that it's dark now, unless you've got a torch and you're looking at the spirit levels in the actual tripod itself. If you've got a camera that's got a built-in level, it's a good idea to use it. So this 5DS has got a built-in. I do know that a number of other different cameras actually have a built-in as well. So if you've got it, use it. So as you can see over here, essentially it shows you whether you got your setup bang on level. So make sure that you use this if you've definitely got this. Right. So next challenge you've got, if you're actually shooting at night, you actually can't use the autofocus because there's actually no light or reference points for the cameras to actually pick up on and actually focus for you. So you've got two options here. The one's a bit more challenging than the other, albeit totally possible. What you do is you're going to have to actually set your lens to manual focus. So on this lens specifically, there's a switch over here that says AF and MF. So manual focus is MF, and then what you do is you actually go and set the focus to roughly infinity and just back off just a little bit. So you can see the infinity symbol over there. Then once you've got your camera set up, you actually use live view. So with live view, what you do is, if you get your camera set up and you're actually looking at the stars, what you do is you actually just go and zoom right in. Now obviously this is not going to be good, but you essentially just focus the lens until you get it absolutely pin sharp on a star, and that's the way to do it. Now, well, what I end up doing is I've got a bit of a cheating technique that I use, that I actually go out during the evening just before I'm planning on actually going out, and focus on something in the real distant horizon, and then essentially I set the lens to manual focus like I just showed you over there, so it's essentially locked in for when I go out shooting at night, and you know you're definitely going to get focus on infinity. So when you're shooting auroras, you really don't want to waste any time with actually going around trying to figure out getting your setup all sorted out. So the next bit that you've got here is that you actually need to shoot in manual mode. It's pretty much essential. So you're going to need a camera that you can essentially dial this into manual mode, and this actually allows you to set all of the specific settings for actual exposure itself. Now what this camera's got, and it's really good, so Canon's higher level model cameras actually have these custom control on the dials. So what I've done is I've actually programmed in specific settings to each of these ones. So you can see the C3, the C2 and the C1. So with the custom dial modes, I've got C1 programmed for using a 10-stop ND filter. So what that does is you can program all of your settings, and you can see it over here. So if I essentially flick to C1, it's already got it set at ISO 100 for optimum picture quality. I've got the aperture set to f9, as this is the sweet spot on my lens for the sharpest photos. You also see it's on bulb mode, so that allows me to set the shutter speed to 1 minute exposure. So just depending on what the actual exposure readings are that I get, I then go and tweak that shutter speed. The other thing that I've got is I've actually got the mirror lockup on, and you can see over here that it's set to 2 seconds, so that what happens is I actually don't even need to use a remote shutter to actually take a photo. I can actually just press the shutter button, and it will take 2 seconds before it actually takes the shot. So with the mirror locked up, you're not going to get any vibration. You'll get a really sharp image. So for me, with this one at night, I've got C3 programmed for shooting auroras or nighttime star shots and that type of thing. So I know in the dark, I just literally take this all the way to the end, get C3, and the general settings that I use. So when shooting an aurora and the stars as well, you need to have your aperture wide open. So I've got it set at f2.8, so that's the widest that this lens can do. I start off at ISO 1600 and then go for a 15-second shot. So you can then go and play around with those, but for me, capturing auroras, I've had two extremes. For the actual time-lapse sequence I'm going to show you, the actual photo itself was taken at ISO 3200 at 20 seconds for each of the different images. With this specific one over here, you can see it's ISO 1000 at 20 seconds. This aurora was absolutely stunning though. It was right above my head, whereas the other one was in the distance, so you need to bump up the ISO to be able to actually get it to reveal. You'll be able to see over here that I actually tried other ones at lower ISOs, which actually did work. The quality of the pictures is actually really good. This is ISO 800, and the quality of the end image is just absolutely astounding. So you've got more than enough bandwidth to edit this if you're shooting in RAW. Next thing for shooting an actual time lapse itself is you need an intervalometer so that you can actually set to trigger the camera to take photos at specific intervals over a period of time. So for a time lapse, you're going to be shooting for maybe about an hour. You don't want to be sitting there actually just pressing the shutter button consistently. So what you can do is go and buy, you can either go and get the name brand. There's a lot of good cheap brands out there as well that they'll do exactly the same thing. Essentially, you can go and say you want to take a photo every 20 seconds for 1 hour, and that's what I'll do. I'll take away and actually do that for you. I'm actually pretty lucky that this camera itself's actually got an intervalometer built into it as well. So that's the reason why I essentially bought this camera. Is it's just got a number of features in it that just makes it absolutely perfect for landscape photography. Right, so onto Auroras. Me personally, I don't claim to be an expert on Auroras, but I know enough to be able to actually predict and actually go out and be able to take a photo of an aurora. So what I'm just going to do is show you a few useful resources that I actually used for actually being able to get out there and being able to capture a decent photo of an aurora. So I essentially use 2 pages on Facebook here. The first one is the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center. So what this site actually does is it gives you an advanced warning of any coronal mass ejections that happen out of the sun, or any solar storms that end up coming towards Earth, and gives an indication that it's definitely going to hit Earth. But the thing that I actually use the most is if you go across to this Facebook page, there's a guy by the name of Andy Stables. This guy's pretty excellent with this page, the way he keeps and maintains it. So Facebook page is called Glendale Sky Aurora. So he's actually based on the Isle of Skye in Scotland. And what he's done is he's actually created an app. So you can go into his page, click use app over here, and you'll be able to actually go through and take a look at it. So this is obviously the desktop version of this, but you can get it for your mobile phone. So if you enable the alerts using Chrome, it will give you a heads up that an aurora is actually kicking off, or there's some form of activity happening. I won't go into all of the detail as to what all of these different metrics and indicators are, but the one good thing though for people in the UK, you can see anybody using this app can go and actually click whether they've actually seen an aurora or not. So you can actually see whether there are people in your specific latitude that are actually seeing at that point in time. So I'll just show you what that kind of looks like in action. So this is a bit of a snapshot from last month, where essentially the app gives you a bit of a heads up that there's a geomagnetic storm in process, and it shows you how far south it actually goes. So people tell you whether there's cloud or whether they're actually picking up the aurora or not, and put different comments. So this is actually Andy Stables' comments over here. So he's pretty dedicated actually. He goes out virtually almost every night and actually goes and takes photos and posts them onto his Facebook page. So you'll be able to see if he's actually seeing auroras or not. Okay, so I'm now across on Adobe Lightroom, and you can see that I've actually imported all of the photos. So this is the sequence of the time-lapse that I've taken. So just remember, proper composition. So you can see I don't have to do any cropping on this image whatsoever. The horizon's perfectly level, etc. And I've got a consistent exposure as a result of using manual mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a rough cut edit for you just of this specific picture, just so you can see I end up cleaning it up. And then I'll show you how you actually apply that edit to all of the different photos within the sequence, so you can use that for your time lapse. So generally what I do is I don't worry too much about the histogram being quite far to the left with a lot of blacks and lots of detail, because I do have a bit of white clipping going on over here with the very bright lighthouse. So I'll try and deal with this, but initially what I always start off with is the graduated filter. So graduated filter, what I'll do is I'll take this and just drag this down from the top down to the horizon. And you could do this for any aurora photo, because you always have a horizon of some sort. So I will always go and work on dehazing the image. So set that to dehaze, and then just drag this all the way up, so you can see it actually just reduces a lot of the light pollution. And then generally what I do is I drop the blacks and the shadows just to reveal the dark night sky and space as well. So just don't go too much over the top with this. Try and get it to a point that actually looks fairly realistic. The other thing that I do try to avoid as well is going and oversaturating the Aurora to the point that it actually just starts looking a bit way too surreal. So with this specific one, I was pretty lucky enough to actually be able to see this Aurora visibly with my eyes. It doesn't actually look like this when you see it with your eyes, because the human eye is not really designed to be picking up all sorts of colors in very dark light. So human eyes are probably focused on being able to actually just pick up a more black and white type of thing. So this light and these actual flares appear to be very pronounced white bits. I do, however, have an Aurora that went directly over my head once where the colors were vivid. It just kind of depends on your point of view, I think. So once I've got that done, next I'll use the adjustment brush just to try and address the specific area. So what I don't want is anything drawing your attention away from the actual Aurora during the time lapse. So I'm going to try and tone down this lighthouse with actual beams of light coming out of it. So what I do is use the adjustment brush, so for exposure, and then what you can do is just use this show selected mask overlay, so it actually shows you where you end up painting. It will just flag as red, so keep it away from the Aurora and just generally paint over the areas where there's very, very bright light. It's possible you won't need to do this, just depending on whatever type of photo you take, but if you've got a very, very bright light source, this is probably a good idea to go ahead and do this. So I just make sure I definitely cover off the light as much as I can, and just make sure that this is generally applied well all over the very bright areas. So I'll just turn off the mask overlay, and then what I'll do is I'll just drop the exposure so you can see it actually dips down, and I'll drop the highlights a bit, maybe not as much as that, and that should do the trick for that. So I'll then just in general try and take up exposure just a little bit, because it's generally a balanced photo now. And then what I do recommend you do is you go and play around with the noise reduction settings over here. I won't take the time to do in this actual video because I end up being pretty obsessive compulsive about it, but you can see that there's a lot of noise in this picture because obviously I shot at a very high ISO at 3200, so there will be noise in the picture. What I'll do here is for the whole picture as well, I'll just go for a little bit more of a dehaze. So you can see it, that just makes it just that little bit better. Don't go too crazy with this though. So that's just a general edit. I generally spend a lot longer on the actual edit itself, but I just wanted to give you just a rough cut overview of exactly what I do. So now that you've got this applied to one photo, to get it applied to all, what you want to do is sync this. So I'll just give the example. So you've got the photo that you've just edited, and you want it to apply to all of these. All you do is just scroll along, hold down Shift, select all, and then it brings up the sync over here. What you do is just click sync and click check all. So essentially what it's asking you to do is, what do you want to sync across from that photo that you edited? So you just want to, if you wanted to ignore something, you can go and untick it if you want, but for this edit we want to apply all of those settings to all of these different photos. So you just literally just press synchronize. You can see that it quickly synchronizes and all of the photos have the same edits actually applied to them. So for the time-lapse sequence, now what you want to do is you actually want to export these to JPEG so you can use them and import them into Adobe Premiere Pro. So what you do is just right click on the actual photos down here, go to export, and what I do is I create a folder called Time-lapse, because you're going to be able to drag that folder across into Premiere Pro. Then I do apply my own watermark to this. You can set up your own if you want to, or if you're not interested in doing that, you don't need to do it. But also do sharpen for screen as well, just so that it gives a little bit more definition to the photo as well. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to export as JPEGs, maximum quality, and literally just click export. Okay, so now I'm across in Adobe Premiere Pro. It's a pretty impressive program used for editing videos. For the purposes of this simple time-lapse, we definitely going to not make use of all of that functionality. So I'm just going to create a very basic time-lapse sequence and just show you how to actually just create that very quickly. So what you first do is you want to create a brand new project, and you'll do that by clicking on this new project button over here. Name it whatever you want. And just make sure that the capture format is set to HDV, and then just click OK. So that's the new project created. I'll talk you through the different areas so that you just got a very brief understanding of what this actually is. Down in this lower left hand corner is essentially the area where you actually import your media. So you can include videos, pictures, etc. into this specific area, and you use those to select and work on what you want to do for creating a sequence of different clips from that actual media itself. You drag that across into this timeline over here, where you then start creating the actual sequence of the video itself. Up here in the top right hand corner will be where the preview of what the actual final video will start to look like, and you can play it and view that, etc. For this specific time-lapse, we won't be using this top left hand corner, but what you can do over here is for each of the different clips that you've got, you can actually cut them, trim them, edit them, apply effects to them up over here. So we've exported the JPEGs from Lightroom into a folder. So I'll just go to that folder and literally take that folder and drag it into the little import area. And you'll see it'll just take literally a couple seconds to actually import it. You then open up the folder and you have all of the different JPEGs that you've got. I'll just show you that if you drag a JPEG onto the timeline, what it does is it brings it for a standard running duration of 5 seconds, which is way too long. So if you click play, you'd literally watch that photo for 5 seconds, which isn't really good for time-lapse purposes to get a smooth play. So first step, what you do is you highlight the top JPEG, scroll down to the bottom, shift, click, so you select all of the different JPEGs, and then you click and drag them across onto the video line over here, and just click drop. So what you want to do is actually zoom out, so hold down Alt and scroll your mouse wheel until you can actually see the whole thing. So you can see it's roughly 10 minutes long. So we want to get the play duration for each of those different pictures down to roughly about half a second for smooth play. So to do that, just literally drag over the whole sequence of JPEGs, right click on it, click speed/duration, and you can see it's set to 5 seconds here. All we're going to do is go and change that to 4/100ths of a second and click on this ripple edit. So what it'll do is when you actually reduce the size of one of them, it's going to pull them all together and keep them as a continuous sequence. Just click OK. And that's that. You can zoom in by holding Alt and scrolling the mouse wheel again. So what we can now do is actually play this, and you'll actually see the... Now it's not going to play perfectly because it's not rendered, so you can either render it while you're doing this, actually just keep the faith that it's actually properly sequenced. So I'm pretty comfortable with this because I've done this a number of times before. So the next step is to actually just export this. So what you do is you go to File, Export, Media, and for the format select H.264. Essentially that's what you want to choose over here as the format. If you wanted to use YouTube settings, you can click on the preset, etc. And there's a number of different things you can choose here. You're not really going to go wrong. You could predominantly choose from these HD 1080 presets or the YouTube 1080p. I generally use the YouTube 1080p because I'm uploading my videos to YouTube and they're already formatted correctly for that. So just do that and use maximum render quality and literally just click export, and it will run for quite a few minutes while it actually renders that, so you can just sit back and relax. So hopefully this has been useful for you guys. I've talked you through quite a lot of information here. Well, what I'll do is I'll actually post the finalized time lapse as a separate video onto my YouTube channel. Do me a favor, click subscribe. I'll hopefully be posting a lot more content of a similar sort of nature, as well as me going out and about taking landscape photos. Cheers.